This is Flipping Junkie Podcast, Episode 6. Welcome to the Flipping Junkie Podcast. My name is Danny Johnson, former software developer turned house flipper, flipping hundreds of houses. Each week, we bring you interviews, strategies, stories, and motivation to help you get started flipping houses and on your way to becoming your own boss and achieving financial freedom. Thanks for spending time with me today. Now let's get to it. Today, Mike Simmons from JustStartRealEstate.com joins us for an information-packed show. Mike's a good friend of mine, never holds back when it comes to great actionable advice. He began investing in 2008, flipping single-family homes. He's since changed up his game and primarily wholesales houses to investors all over Michigan. Today's show covers a lot of ground. Some of the great takeaways involve the importance of having an accountability partner in this business, as well as exactly how to find and approach a mentor in a way that will get them to want to work with you, even if you don't have much experience. Learn how Mike found a great real estate agent that finds him lots of deals. He even went as far as telling us exactly what his postcard says that he uses to generate tons of leads. Enjoy the show. All right, hello everybody. This is Danny Johnson, Flipping Junkie Podcast. Hope you guys are having a great day. I'm super excited to have my guest on today. His name is Mike Simmons, and he's a house flipper, fix and flipper, and also podcasts with the Just Start Real Estate podcast. He's a good friend of mine. I've known him for a while, and I'm super pumped to have him on the show. How you doing, Mike?
Hey, Danny. It's good to be here. Thank you. I appreciate this nice intro.
Yeah, thanks. Tell the audience a little bit about yourself and, the fix and flipping that you do.
Yeah, no problem. So I am a real estate investor here in Michigan and started back in '08, which was, like the worst time in the world in real estate if you're like a home owner or just like a regular average home buyer. But for real estate investors, it was like kids in a candy store. If you remember back then, if you had something you were fixing and flipping long term or something, you might have got caught in the middle there. But for me, I was starting out and I didn't have a lot of money. So when everything crashed and everything was basically a fire sale, I jumped in at that point. It was just dumb luck. It wasn't like I didn't calculate that, but that's just when I finally got the nerve to jump in. Everything crashed and I was able to, start investing and start picking up properties because everything was so cheap. And Michigan is unlike other states where real estate's kind of inexpensive here, even in the good times. So when everything kind of crashed, it was like dirt cheap. It was incredible what you could pick up really nice houses for. And I got kind of lucky that way because I think if the buy-in was what it was in 2005, for example, I might have struggled a little bit more how to figure out how to do it because when I started, I didn't have a bunch of private investors and things like that. I actually, my first deal, I financed it with a traditional mortgage through, a mortgage company and then just like pooled all of our savings and credit cards and like pulled money out of savings accounts and things, and we kind of went all in, my wife and I, on the first flip. Wow. And it went really, really well. But I don't know, it would have been a different story, I think, trying to get approved for the loan and things. It was a $40,000 house we bought, and it was a house that cost like $120,000 a couple of years earlier. So we were in pretty good position to buy this house and then resell it for a profit because the profit margins were, they were lower, but so were the buy-in prices. So that's kind of how we got started. And then from there, I had a really good mentor and I had some really good advice starting out. And I was able to take that one small first success and just propel myself forward with private investors and all kinds of things. So it went really well from that point forward.
Yeah, the power of that first deal, like just getting to that first deal is what's so difficult for everybody. But once you do it, man, it just opens up so many doors and so many possibilities. So. Yeah, and I've talked a couple times before I actually talk about it quite a bit, whenever it's always a sort of a trade-off. So when you've got a hot market, it's a lot harder to find the deals, but it's real easy to sell them. And then when you have a market like it was in 2008, it's a lot easier to find the deals, but then you've got to consider longer holding cost and possibility of having trouble having someone be able to be approved for a loan afterwards.
Yeah, no doubt about it. That's what, it's funny. People always say, is this they'll ask me, is this a good market or a bad market to invest? And I'm like, there's no such thing. It's just, you just have to change your approach. Every market's good and every market's bad, depending on, I guess, how you look at it. But you can invest in any market as long as you don't just ignore what the market's doing. figure out what it's doing and adjust your model to that, and it all works. I mean, there's guys that have been investing for 30 years. Try telling them, there's some markets that you can't invest, and they'll laugh at you.
Absolutely. Yeah, and and things trend. It's not like one day, like tomorrow, all of a sudden it's just going to be gone. You can see it coming from a mile away, and so it's just being sure that you're not sticking your head in the sand and just thinking everything's hunky dory, and buying up stuff at the same price as if the market's starting to turn. You just start to buy at lower prices, and I think it's also good that when you started at that time, I'm sure that you learned how to be really conservative, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm way more of a risk taker than my wife is, and she is my partner in this, and was then too. And man, I always joke around. It's not really a joke, but it's funny. If that first deal had not gone well, we wouldn't be talking right now. I wouldn't be an investor, because she just would have said absolutely not. Yeah. So she's real nervous about it. She's not now. Now, we're buying and selling houses all the time. She doesn't even pay close attention to the actual ins and outs of the houses. But back then it was like we pushed in literally all of the savings we had, and we went into credit card debt pretty deeply to do the first one. And had that went south, man, it would have been a really tough conversation to try to talk about doing the second one.
No, I bet. That was a sort of a sink or swim sort of situation for you. So,
yeah.
Did you doubt yourself at any point in that? Were you just thinking positive and saying, "I'm just going to make this happen"?
I didn't doubt myself at all. I'm sure my wife had her doubts, because she's just a conservative person. She just sort of doesn't ignore the potential downside, where I sort of am more likely to ignore the potential downside and just forge ahead. I really wasn't that nervous. I was only nervous because she was nervous. And at the time, this is when all the house flipping shows were getting real popular. Flip this house and all that. And you watch those things, and we had to stop watching them because, yeah, they turn out well most of the time, but the nightmare things that happen every day gave her new fears of well, that could happen. I never thought about that. So we literally had to make a conscious effort to we're not watching these shows anymore, because they're freaking her out. They didn't really freak me out. I'm way more of a risk taker, but yeah, they were freaking her out. So we just totally stopped watching those things.
Well, that's awesome that you've got that balance, with your wife, and because I feel like I'm more like you are, and I'd probably go out there and make all kinds of big mistakes if my wife wasn't there to stop me. And she's always invested with me, been a partner in the business and really, done a lot. And the funny thing is, I will ask her all the time for advice on things, right? And typically we joke about this all the time, but typically I'll say, "Oh yeah, well, thanks for the advice. I don't know if that's how I want to do it."
Yeah.
And I give it a couple days, and I my father also flips houses, and I'll call him and ask him for advice. And he'll tell me basically the same exact thing that my wife did. And I'll go back to her and say, "Yeah, my dad said this, and I agree." And she's like, "That's what I told you 2 days ago." So, it's it's all the time that happens. It's hilarious, but.
Yeah. It's funny, when we started out too, this was, looking back, it's kind of silly, but when we started out, we didn't tell our friends or family what was going on, because we were so, even this, for me, this was true too. I was so worried about negative opinions of what we were doing. And back then, if you remember, every newscast, every article in the newspaper was about real estate is terrible and people are losing their houses and losing their life savings. And it was gloom and doom. So we didn't tell anybody, because we didn't want to hear negative opinions of what we were doing. We thought, it could kind of shake our confidence here a little bit. So we didn't tell anybody. And then as it went on, we were flipping, more and more houses. We still really didn't bring it up, because our family's real blue collar, traditional, get a job, get in a union, work, for 30 years, retire. We didn't think they'd get it. So one day we were at, I think it was Thanksgiving dinner, and they got a phone call at my house. Well, a couple weeks prior, I had been contacted by the Detroit News, the local big newspaper here in Michigan, and they wanted to do an article on us. So I said, yeah, sure. So they came out and interviewed us, took some pictures at a house we were flipping, and I kind of figured it would be a blurb on page 12 of the real estate section. So we get a call, and it came out that day or the day before or whatever, the paper, and it was my uncle saying, "Hey, Mike's in the newspaper." And I heard my mom on the other. I just heard her side of it. She's like, "What?" She's like, "He didn't say anything." "What? All right, I'm going to talk to him." Hung up. She's like, "You're on the front page of the Detroit newspaper."
Oh, wow.
A big full color picture of my wife and I, and about flipping houses. I was like, "Oh yeah, well, we flip houses." We didn't tell you. So it was kind of crazy. It was just us being a little paranoid about what people would say, worrying about what everyone thinks.
Well, that's
It's
crazy. Yeah, I thought you
yeah.
meant by not talking about it, you just didn't talk about it. Like they knew that you were kind of doing it on the side, but you
Mm-mm.
just didn't talk about it. So they
We didn't
didn't
tell
even
them.
know at all that
No,
you were doing it. Wow.
no. Just
Wow.
crazy,
Yeah.
just being ridiculous. I mean, it seems silly now. I mean, I podcast and I talk about it. I get up in front of Rias and talk, and I'm open about everything. But back then, we were just so worried that they were going to say we were making a huge mistake that it would like freak us out. So we just didn't tell them. And then, we just didn't get around to it after that. After it went pretty well, the first couple houses, we just didn't really get around to saying anything. And we don't, we live like an hour away from our parents, so it's not like we see them all the time. So yeah, it was just kind of funny. They found out because we were featured in the newspaper.
All right. So if your family and your friends didn't flip houses, what's the backstory? Like why did you decide to get into investing in real estate?
Well, I was on the long-term plan. You know, how some people go to college for 10 years to get their degree. I sort of feel like I went in the same path with real estate. I got interested back in the early 2000s. I was working for an automotive company, and when you're in your 20s, you don't think about retirement. And if you're smart, you do. But if you're not, you think about it later in life when you're getting a little closer. So when I was in my early 30s, I started contemplating, because I hated my job, and I started thinking, how am I ever going to retire? What's it going to take? So you start doing the math and figuring out, okay, cost of living increases, so forth. I'm gonna have to work until I'm 150 at this rate. Like I'm never gonna be able to retire, right? It's just never the numbers aren't working out. So I started thinking I've got to learn about investing. So, learn about investing. What are you gonna do? Stocks, right? Like trading stocks and day trading back then was very popular. So I started researching stocks and how to invest in the stock market and day trading and things like that. Getting on the internet night after work and when the kids were in bed and stuff, and reading about this stuff, it was like reading insurance like handbooks. Like it was the most dry, boring. I had zero interest, but I was trying so hard to learn because I knew I needed to do something, and I would always end up on like at ESPN.com or something. I was always got my attention diverted because I hated it. It was boring me.
Yeah, that's the point where you realize like maybe this isn't what I should be
Yeah,
doing.
exactly.
Right?
But if you type in like investing and how to invest in things and you Google it, eventually you'll get to real estate investing will pop up at some point. Maybe not first page, but it'll pop up. So then I'm like, oh, real estate investing, what's this? Started reading about it. That held my attention. I was really excited about it the more I learned. And I was one of those people that went on to like forums and read success stories. And, I could read success stories for hours and hours and hours. I just absorbed it. And then I started getting books and I was really into it, but I just didn't pull the trigger and do anything about it for like 6 years. So finally I got to the point where I told my wife, I'm like, listen, I want to do this. I know it makes you nervous. They're having a local boot camp. This local guy who's an investor is having this weekend boot camp. I really want to do it. Now, it was like $2,000 to get in this boot camp, which was just an obscene amount of money for us to think about spending on something like that. Somehow, I don't even know how I did it. Somehow I convinced her that we should do it. We did it, and I knew what would happen if we spent that kind of money on a boot camp to learn how to do something. There was no way my wife was going to let us not do it. If we're going to spend that kind of money, she was going to be relentlessly pursuing me to make sure that I'm doing it. So it was sort of like one of those things I knew if I could get her on board, she would be like way behind it. So we did. We learned a lot. Not sure if it was worth $2,000, but it was what it was good for and what it was important for is that was the springboard that launched me into investing. And honestly, if it would have been $10,000, looking back, it would have been more than worth it because every penny I've made has been a direct result of actually taking that first step and getting going. So I'm
Absolutely.
a huge fan and cheerleader for people who want to learn and even pay for training or pay for mentoring or coaching because, you can't really look at necessarily the price you're being charged, although some people charge obscene amounts, and you got to be a little careful. But if it makes you take that first step and you actually start flipping or wholesaling or buying rentals and you launch that whole thing, what's the cost? So $2,000 to make the money that I've made in the last 8 years, it's more than worth it.
I have to ask too. Well, first though, I completely agree. And actually, I laid my foundation with a course. I think it was on eBay for $150.
Okay.
And when that course was probably new, it was probably either $500 or $1,000. But I got it on eBay for like $150, and that laid the foundation, for all of, the basic knowledge of the business. And, I'm sure my kids, even subconsciously, like they know a lot more about flipping than they think, other than from seeing what we do. because they listened to those CDs with us in the car for so long.
Oh, wow.
We
That's
burned
awesome.
those things out. Like we listened to them over and over and over again. But they even had sayings that, like some of the things that were said in those audios, CDs that were, like funny to them because the way, so they would always like say things for years, like some of the clips from those audio CDs. But
Yes.
the thing I wanted to ask you though about the course, so here's something I've noticed a lot, and I'm sure you've noticed as well, where somebody will get a course or they'll get training, go to a boot camp or whatever, and directly afterwards they're like super excited to get going. They've gone through the course, and rather than taking those first steps, they go and get another course.
Yeah.
And so how did you feel when you were going through that first training that you did, and then afterwards, what made the difference? Why did you not just go in and start getting other courses, or did you buy more courses?
No, I didn't. And I tell people all the time when they ask me, I am all about paying for training, paying for knowledge to accelerate your learning. But I will say I am not one of those people that can say, I know I spent $15,000 in courses before I did my first deal. I spent $2,000 on a boot camp, and I knew to answer you asked me two questions. How did I feel during the boot camp, and why didn't I do that? The reason I didn't buy more after that is, like I said, we spent $2,000 on a boot camp. If I would have told my wife I was going to spend $25 on a book after that, she would have said, "For what? We just spent $2,000 on a boot camp. It was a 3-day long, 8 hours a day boot camp. What could you possibly need?" So that was sort of it too. It was sort of like, the greatest thing in this business is an accountability person or partner or somebody that you can bounce ideas off of. She was really, really good, and still really, really an accountability partner for me, because she won't let me forget. If I say I'm going to do something, she won't let it go until she knows that I did it, which is great, because I can be unfocused and I can be a little bit of, entrepreneur fever kind of a thing, where I have a different idea every day and I get unfocused. So she's really good at focusing me that way. And during the boot camp, I was excited. We didn't know anything. Like, we were as green and new as we could be. I mean, I had read books and things, but there was a lot of gaps in the information when you read books and things like that. So we were just absorbing it. We loved it. Looking back now with the experience that I have, the content was pretty light, but it was enough to get us off our butt, and it allowed us to meet people, and the mentor was accessible to me after the boot camp. So I felt like I had support and somebody that I could go and ask a question to if I really needed to know something specific that I was trying to do. So it was great. I mean, like I said, it was a lot of money, but I really do credit that mentor and that coach with literally all my success. I mean, he was really good mentor, but he was a great motivator, and he was really good at making you think big and making you believe that you can really do this. And I think that's the problem that most new people have. They want to do it. They believe that other people have done it. They just don't really believe that they can do it. They really don't. I mean, they might say I believe I can do it, but why aren't they taking that first step? Why aren't they taking action? Well, they really don't believe they can do it. And having someone who's there to kind of help you get over that fear is really priceless, in my opinion.
No, absolutely. And I think that and some people say, well, that's great, I understand that and I believe that, but how do you find a mentor? How do you find somebody and get their attention and have them want to help you?
Yeah, it's a good question. My guy was local. I don't think they have to necessarily be local, but in my case, it was helpful to me because he was tangible. I could go and see him and talk to him and spend time. But the best way, in my opinion, to do it, especially if you don't want to spend a lot of money, is start attending your local RIAs, your local real estate investing groups, and network. Meet people. Be genuine. Be nice. Don't be asking for things every 5 seconds. Don't be trying to take people's time up. Just be interested. Be yourself. Offer to help people. Offer to give them any assistance, because probably you don't have. I'm just going to go out on a limb and say most people don't have an abundance of money when they're starting to spend, and they don't have any knowledge. So the only thing you can offer someone that might be of interest to them or useful to them is your time. So if you can find a way to make yourself useful to a local investor who's doing it, who's actually involved in the business and successful, and get to know them and try to offer them some value, and like I said, that might just be your time, and ask them for help. Ask them if they would mind mentoring you, maybe just being someone you can call once in a while, not all the time, and ask questions of, and try to find someone local that you can somehow provide value to that can help you. Now, if that isn't an option, or if you don't want to do that, or if you really just like want to get started immediately and have someone coach you right away without you having to invest that time, there's plenty of people that you can go to and pay online. The problem is there's, for every one really good, conscientious, person who will provide value, there's probably 100 people who just are trying to take your money and they really don't know what they're talking about. So it's like going to a mechanic. If you don't know anything about cars, how do you evaluate a mechanic? It's hard. References, talk to people, get involved in communities like Bigger Pockets, or listen to podcasts and start getting a feel. There's a lot of really good people out there. I mean, a lot of really good people who really will help, and they can help you. You just need to find the right one, and sometimes that's the challenge.
Right, and I completely agree with trying to find somebody local if you can. And, one way to do that, to narrow, because there's probably likely seems like there's even thousands or tens of thousands of investors in some of the bigger cities.
Sure.
And so, you go to some of these RIA meetings and, you've got to realize the majority of people are new and haven't done a deal. And there's some people, that are doing some deals. And I always highly recommend taking the time, get out of your comfort zone, talk to other people. And when you do talk to somebody else and you ask them, have you been flipping and how long you've been flipping? But then also, after talking for a while, ask them who in town do they know that does the most deals of anybody else that they know.
Yeah.
And after talking to quite a few people, you're going to start hearing some of the same names over and over again. Those are the people that you really want to spend the time trying to get to work with you. And, Mike's advice on offering value to them, that's huge because, active investors get asked all the time for people to help them out.
Sure.
And, what's in it for them? They're busy. Everybody is busy. They're not going to take the time to say, yeah, okay, sure, let me do that. I don't know you, and I don't know exactly what you want from me and everything, but let me stop everything and help you. I mean, it's just not going to happen. And so offering value, and an example of that is just even something as simple as, I'll hang bandit signs for you for free. It's just, things like that. And I always advise, if you can lay your foundation with a course or training that you can study yourself, and then start doing marketing for motivated sellers. And I'll tell you what, if you've got a lead or two that comes in that seems even remotely decent, and you take it to one of these guys, they're going to listen to you.
Oh, yeah.
I've got this lead. I don't know how to work it. Can you help me work this? And, maybe I can wholesale it to you. That kind of thing, is going to make them stop and spend some time with you, because there's a potential deal for them and a new source of deals for them if you can start wholesaling to them. And then getting that relationship is worth a lot more than that one lead or something. So.
Yeah, absolutely. If you can bring someone a lead, like you said in that specific example, you're separating yourself from, the dozens and dozens of other people who approach them all the time wanting something from them. Now you provide real value, right? You're giving them something. You're providing, you're offering them the currency that they need in their business. So, if someone brings me a deal that I can do something with, and they say, oh, by the way, I'd like your help. Can you give me advice? Can I wholesale this to you? Can you maybe come out and take a look at this property? Now, all of a sudden, I answer the phone, and I'm a little bit more interested in working with them, because they're not just taking and taking and taking. They're trying to provide some value to me too. And, just that alone will separate you from almost every other person who approaches them.
Yeah, absolutely. And to get into a little bit more of the actual flipping that you do, would you be willing to go ahead and walk us through how you're typically getting your leads, and then how you're analyzing those leads?
Yep.
And then sort of the process that you take all the way through to fixing it and selling it.
Yeah, no problem. And actually, over the one of the reasons why, I have a podcast like you talked about at the top, and I haven't been as active with my podcast. I sort of took a few months off because my business went through a huge metamorphosis in the last 6 months. Huge. I spent the first 7 years or so in this business flipping houses. I'm doing a lot more wholesaling at this point than I'm doing flipping houses, but I would love to walk you through a process of flipping a house, because that's what I've done for years. That's what I know the best. So the way that I found deals prior to, say, the last year was through a realtor. I had one realtor who I worked with exclusively. He sent me deals. He knew what I was looking for. He could send me kind of pre-qualified, pre-screened leads from the MLS. And that's how I was buying all my leads. Nowadays, I'm doing a lot more, almost exclusively direct marketing to find leads. And that's been hugely successful for me. So I don't know if you want to get into that specifically, or
Well,
you
yeah,
just want to like a high level.
Right, yeah, like a high level, and then we can delve into certain parts
Okay.
of it that, with questions that people might likely have. So with the realtor, like, what kind of relationship was that? Or more importantly, how did you tell them or coach them in telling, finding the right leads from the MLS to send to you? Because I'm sure you didn't want everything off the MLS just coming to you.
No.
And what was the process of like looking at what he sent to you or she sent to you and, making offers on those?
Okay. So it started out when my first, actually it was my first deal. I went on to, I believe it was Zillow, and like looked in it was a town called, it doesn't really matter I guess for your listeners because they don't know the town, but it was a town name called Warren here in Michigan, Warren, Michigan. So I went onto Zillow and tried to look up all the houses that were for sale or sold in Warren, and then just started making a big list. And what I found was there were the same realtors coming up time after time after time that had sold houses in Warren. So I just sort of took that list and went down the list and started bringing people into the house that I was flipping, that first house, and basically interviewing them to sell it. So I found someone who had done just a ton of deals in that area, interviewed him, brought him in, told him what I'm doing. He sold that house. And then that was sort of what started the relationship. And then it was just constant communication. I would say, listen, this is what I'm looking for. And then they put you on like that drip email thing where you basically get a ton of, houses come into your email, and, the vast majority are no good. So I would pick out the ones that did make sense, communicate back to him. There was just a lot of feedback that I was giving him. This is why I picked these houses. This is why these other houses don't make sense for me. Maybe they didn't have a basement, or maybe it didn't have a garage, or whatever the case may be, or it was just out of the area that I want to be in. So we started like refining it. So every time he sent me a list, I gave him feedback, and then he'd send me the next list, I would give him feedback. So we just filtered it that way over time. And I worked with him for about almost like 7 years basically, that I was flipping houses. So he would send me the leads. Once I found the ones that I liked, I had a full-time job, so I would go after work with a flashlight and a notepad and just start walking through these houses, going into the basements, and a lot of them didn't have electricity. So
Wow.
It was just these crazy adventures. And that was, my wife had no interest, took no part in that. She's like, I'm not going into any basement at, 10 o'clock at night or 9 o'clock at night when I can't see what's going on. And, there's a lot of walking through spider webs and stuff, but I would just bring a flashlight and just go through these houses and take notes. Then I was a part of a mastermind at the time. The mentor, the guy that I did the boot camp with, also had a paid mastermind monthly, a closed membership mastermind, and it was full of all kinds of the people that you talk about you want to find when you go to these RIAs, these open RIAs. It was just chock full of serious investors. Like everybody in there pretty much knew what they were doing and knew what they were talking about. So I would go back to these meetings and say, hey, this is what I found. What do you think? And this is the numbers I came up with. And what do you think about it? So I got a lot of really good feedback from those people in the early days when I didn't really know what I was talking about. So I would walk through the notepad. A lot of times I would have somebody from that group meet me at the house if I really thought it was a good one, and walk through it and just check my numbers and kind of explain to me how they see it and how they're calculating the rehab, which is really huge in the beginning. I mean, there's a lot of, you can go to a realtor to find out what the house should be worth after repair, and a lot of realtors have no clue what that even means. So you have to coach them up a little bit on that, but they can get you that information. They have access to the sold comps, and it's just a matter of understanding the philosophy, but they can get you that. What they can't tell you is renovation costs. Most realtors, vast majority, don't know. They're not house flippers. They don't really have that experience. So that's key information, and it's a component that you can't be off on a lot, or you're going to lose money. Especially in Michigan, where the buy-in price is 40 and maybe the sell price is 70 or 80, and it's going to take 15 or 20. There's not thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars that you can afford to be off, like these flipping shows where their renovation budget is $40,000 and it goes up to $80,000, and they still make $100,000. It's like, what?
Yeah.
Like in my world, if you're off by double, you're losing a ton of money. So, we were real careful about that stuff, but that we got help, and eventually I learned obviously how to quote rehab, and so then as far as contractors, so I made tons of mistakes in the beginning. The first time I hired a contractor, went on Craigslist, got like 10 names, 10 people responded. I made an appointment for each of them at the house, like every hour I would have a new person coming. So I had like this 10-hour schedule for that house. So I went there in the morning. First person didn't show up. Okay, well, it's a bummer, but okay, no big deal. Second hour, person didn't show up. Third hour, the guy showed up. Went through the house, seemed like a good enough guy. The fourth hour, nobody showed up. Fifth hour, nobody showed up. Sixth hour, the person showed up, showed in the house, great. And then nobody showed up after that. But I was there for the whole 10 hours. And I was like,
I've been there before.
Oh my God, what a huge, like, one of the best things I can do to give people their life back is I tell people is when you hire a contractor, if you go into Craigslist or however you're doing it, it's good to get references. First of all, that's the best place to start.
Yeah, it's
but if you
screen
don't have
them
that
on the
ability,
phone, right?
screen them on the phone. But if you're gonna meet with them, I always tell people, I don't care if you meet with one or you meet with 10 contractors. You schedule that time exact same time for everybody. Show them as a group. Yeah, some contractors won't like it. Tough, because I don't want you sitting in a house for 10 hours. Show the whole group, find somebody from that group. But back to what I did. So I found somebody, right? One of two people. I picked the guy who was like closer to my age, seemed like a good guy. We got along pretty well. Like I liked him personally, seemed like a good dude. Went, did the renovations, didn't do a bad job. I paid him, we were done, moved on. I got a call a week later from the electrical contractor. Hey, I never got paid. You owe me $1,000. I was like, come on, I paid the general contractor. They're like, well, you may or may not have, but we didn't get paid, and so we're going to put a lien on your house, which is terrible when you're trying to flip a house. You can have a lien on it. So I negotiated with them and got the price down, but it was the thing that taught me that a release of lien is critical when you have a general contractor to make sure that all the subcontractors get paid. So release of lien, getting those things signed, that's really important. You should make sure you're doing that. But I got through that process. Of course, my contractor didn't respond or answer the phone when I called to say, hey, why didn't the electrical contractor get paid? He sort of just dropped off the map, so I couldn't use him again. Ended up finding someone on the next property that I used for years after that. But that first experience was tough because I didn't even know what they were talking about when they said they didn't get paid. Like, I have a check. I have like a canceled check that you can see it got cashed. Like, I know I paid it. And they're like, listen, you paid the general contractor. He never paid us. He took your money and left. So it was an education on what a contractor can do to you if you're not careful.
Right, absolutely. And that's sort of the importance of getting that mentor or getting a course that has a lot of these details that you don't get in, or kind of skip over when you don't have some sort of, planned education where it covers everything, from the start to finish. But how, in finding a contractor, I find that, if you have to be patient and have to take time. Don't get tired of looking for a contractor. Because when you have a great contractor, like you just said, I found another one I used for years. When you do have a good one and you keep them for years, your life is so much better. Because when you have cruddy contractors you're worried about, you have situations where the subs don't get paid, your life is miserable, and you start wondering if you want to even be in the rehabbing business anymore.
Yeah, I think what helped me out was my day job. I was like a project manager. That was my function. So I was really comfortable, and I really kind of enjoyed timelines, budgets, overseeing projects. Like, I was all about that. So I think that my background helped me find and maintain a contractor for a long time, whereas some people are uncomfortable, talking to contractors or maybe confronting them from time to time if there's an issue, or like questioning the timeline or questioning the things that inevitably come up during a rehab where there's some extra cost associated. Things pop up that couldn't have maybe been identified early on. A lot of people are super uncomfortable with that whole process. So
yeah, that's a problem.
I wasn't. Yeah. It's a problem because contractors will make or break your business on some level, right? I mean, you have to buy right and you have to sell right and all that, but contractors can really just kill a deal with poor work, just taking off with your down payment or whatever the case may be. So there's a lot of do's and don'ts when it comes to contractors, and one of them is, don't give them all the money up front. Don't give them 50% of the money up front. And you'd be surprised. It sounds ridiculous, but people still do it. I still hear horror stories in my local market of people who give all the money up front and then never hear from the guy again.
Yeah, and a big one, a really big one I hear all the time too is somebody will get a contractor they've never used before, never check references or anything, and give them a decent amount of money to start. They start and they go through, and before they repair rotted trim or replace trim or repair the walls, they go through and spray, paint the whole inside of the house.
Yeah.
and then come and say, hey, I'm halfway done, pay me, the half of the amount.
Yeah.
They did what they could do in a day that made it look like they did a ton of work and are wanting pay, and people fall into the trap saying, oh yeah, he's already kind of like, look how far he is into this, and and then they leave, they take off and go to another job where they can get another half up front. And obviously not all of them are like that. You just have to be careful and have a good contract to have these contractors sign that states how everything's going to happen and the draw schedule based on work completed in the proper order.
Yeah, that's huge, and I think that's a really important thing, having a contract that your contractors sign. Now, it doesn't mean they won't, skip out, but it helps ensure that they're gonna do what they say. It also makes sure that all the agreements are on paper and clear up front. So because there can be an awful lot of, well, that's not what we talked about, that's not what you promised on both sides, right? You can say that as the investor, hey, this isn't what you said, and they say it back to you a lot of times too. This isn't what we agreed on. So you should have things in writing when it comes to real estate on all aspects. But the other thing is, it's very important, is make sure that you're there. You have to be at the project all the time, especially when you're new. Now, if you've been doing this a while and you've had a contractor for years and there's a level of comfort and trust, that's a different story. But especially in your first couple of deals, you can't just set them up and give them their down payment and walk away and not go back for a few weeks. You need to be there, like, if not every day, every other day. So they can't pull the wool over your eyes and say, hey, we've done all this work. You're there every day. You know what's going on. It's a lot harder for them to fool you when you're there every day.
Yeah, and I suggest doing random times too, because when I was working a full-time job and I was flipping part-time, there were always, like during lunch hour or something, there were times that people expected me to stop by.
Yeah.
And so you don't kind of see what the reality of things are. Maybe they're not showing up until 11:30 in the morning when they should be there, trying to get this job done. They're working some other job at the same time. Yep. And, you got to have your schedule so that you keep it on schedule, because holding costs can kill you on a deal, depending on the price range of house and everything. But,
oh, yeah, for sure. For sure. And if you're there every day and you're talking about the timeline every day, it's just so hard for things to get completely out of hand. You're too involved. But some people just aren't involved, and they avoid it because they don't like that interaction. They're uncomfortable directing people. You just have to get over that if you're going to do this.
Right, yeah. Yeah, and that's something that, it's just a matter of, like, you can't think, well, I don't think I can do that, and just not get into the business. It's something where you're going to get out of your comfort zone at so many levels in this business. Talking with sellers, talking with contractors, dealing with contractors, confronting them if there's an issue, and all those things you just kind of have to learn how to do. But look at the potential. Like, what other business can you make such a huge profit on one deal?
It's the greatest business in the world, but if you can't or won't get out of your comfort zone, it's next to impossible. And everyone's comfort zone is different. I wasn't uncomfortable confronting, directing, managing rehab crews. Really, my discomfort and the thing that I struggled with the most was the networking side of it. And as much as you may want to think, or somebody may think, why do I need to network? I'll just find deals and I'll deal with contractors. You really need to network, because the real key to this is when you start making those connections with, for example, in my case, private investors. Oh my gosh. Like, my world opened up and like you wouldn't believe once I started networking and finding private investors who were willing to fund my deals. So the first deal that I did, I made $15,000. It was a $40,000 buy-in, like a $75,000 or $80,000 sale price, $15,000 rehab, and then other costs, holding costs and things. I ended up making like 15 grand. But what was important was my mentor said, tell everybody, go to meetings, start a Facebook page, put pictures up, have video up, blog about, like, tell the world, everyone who will listen, tell them what you're doing. And I did exactly that. And it attracted certain local investors in my area who said, hey, I really like what you guys are doing. I'm following you on the internet, or I saw you talk at this RIA, or I was, whatever. And I really like you guys. I'd like to get involved in your next project. Let me know what you have coming up. And from those kind of conversations, the first deal we did, we said, I told you we went 100% in as far as the rehab with our own money, right, and we used a bank. Every deal after that, like literally every single deal, I didn't put a dime of my own money in for nothing. EMD, nice. Nothing. And it was just the greatest way to scale in the world. But if you're not willing to go out and talk to people and network and meet people and tell them what you're doing, it's going to be very hard to scale and do it full time.
Right. No, I absolutely agree with that. Now back to the So we've talked about how you were finding deals with realtors,
Yep.
and then or a realtor, and then getting the property and handling the contractors and things like that. So how were you selling these houses?
I was using my realtor to sell them too. So he was helping me buy them and then sell them at the end of the day. And that's a process too, because the first go around, it was like the guy who I was using as a realtor was like a traditional realtor. He wasn't, maybe like a quote investor friendly realtor. I sort of had to make him investor friendly. So there was a lot of educating him on, I don't necessarily need to get the very top dollar if it's going to mean I sit on this house for 6 months. I would rather get less and sell it in 30 days than hold on to it for 6 months and get, an extra $5,000. So that was a little bit foreign to him. Most homeowners are like, I need to get this because, they're almost underwater or whatever the case may be. As an investor, speed is your friend. You need to get in and out of these as quickly as possible. So I had to kind of go through that process of putting things up on the MLS. They were way too much, I was asking way too much. I was taking his advice, and then we slowly worked it into. I would say, hey, what do you think? His name was Rob. I said, hey, Rob, what do you think this house will sell for once we're done renovating it? I think it'll go for 150. And I would say, does that mean it'll go in 30 days for 150,
Absolutely,
or it could sell for 150 at some point if we find the right buyer? And he'd be like, well, if you find the right buyer, you could get 150. I'd go, what is the 30-day price? That's what I'm interested in. So there was a lot of those conversations, and he'd go, well, for 139, we could sell it in 30 days. Well, that still met my profit goals, and I'd say list it for that. Let's get out of this thing quick. I wasn't the kind of person who would go real high and then, systematically drop the price. And I also have never done the thing where people go list it incredibly, like way lower than you want, and get a bidding war started. I've never had the faith that there's going to be a bidding war. So I don't list them real low. So I list them at the higher end of what I think is reasonable, and then give myself a little bit of flexibility. But you never go for in my opinion, my business, I never go for to get every single dollar out of it. But I always think that I should be at least somewhere reasonable to the high end, maybe, because I know that when people go to look at my houses, if they're looking at 10 houses that day, mine's probably going to be the nicest. It's freshly renovated, and I think that it's going to leave a big impression. So I can afford to ask at the higher end of the good, of what it should be, but I'm never trying to set the market price with my houses.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that's that talks a little bit about some of a big problem I see with a lot of newer investors with, they tend to get in and start fixing it up as if they were going to move into the house. They don't have an intention to move into the house, but they feel like it should be up to a level where they'd be interested, or happy moving into it, when you should never do that. Really what you're doing is finding the best finishes and fixtures that put you, makes your rehab nicer than the competition you're going to be dealing with when you put the house up for sale.
That's a great point. Oh, that's such a good point. Contractors and over renovating are the two things that'll kill you faster than anything in this business, in my opinion. And I've known more people who have burned themselves with the type of renovation they've done than gotten burned by contractors, believe it or not. It's so true. When you buy a house to flip, you really, especially when you're new, you really need to go visit other houses, open houses, and see what the other houses in the neighborhood look like in comparison to yours. And for me, and where I was flipping houses in the beginning, granite countertops were absolutely not necessary. It's, people think, oh, you put in granite and high-end fixtures, and no, you don't, because if you put in brand new materials at the level that is expected in that neighborhood, that's all you need. At some point you're over renovating. So you can take a house that should have an after repair value of $150,000, and you can put in gold fixtures and granite and marble everywhere. You're not going to get much more than 150. There is a limit to what a house will sell for, no matter what you do to it. And the worst thing you can do is go, well, I wouldn't necessarily want, Formica countertops in my house. I would want granite. Well, that's great, but in this neighborhood, a brand new Formica countertop is all they expect. They don't even really appreciate much more than that, but it's new. You know what I mean? Like, new trumps expensive. Absolutely. Almost all the time.
Yeah, and you find out real quick, when you go and look at the competition, most of the time you're not dealing with a whole lot. It's not very difficult to make your house look a lot better than the rest of them. Yeah, and it could be as simple as like a backsplash, for the kitchen. All the other houses don't have them. and you put in a nice mosaic tile, glass tile, spend maybe $200 or $300 on it, but that's as much as we do a lot of times, and it just makes it stand out.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just so true. When you look at the other houses in the neighborhood that are for sale, chances are all of them, or the vast majority of them, haven't been updated since the 70s, 80s, 90s. And so your brand new countertop, your brand new cabinets are going to just blow their mind when they see it. So it does, whether or not you spend $3,000 or $8,000 on the cabinets is going to be irrelevant to them. So you can't overdo it for the neighborhood. Now, some neighborhoods require higher end fixtures, and that's fine, and higher end cabinets and things like that. But if you have to know that, because the same mistake can be made when you put in low end finishes to a high end neighborhood house. You're gonna burn yourself that way too. Nobody will buy it.
Oh, absolutely. Well, let's move on pretty quickly to, how you had mentioned before you were getting most of your deals through realtor or
Yep.
real estate agent. And so what are you doing now for most of your deals?
Now, from all of my deals, really, I don't even go on the MLS anymore. I'm kind of stubborn that way. I found something that works better, and I've kind of went back to the MLS a few times in the last 6 months and never really find what I want, and just it's more of a hassle. So I'm doing direct marketing, primarily postcards out to homeowners, to people that I find. I buy the list online. It's no secret. List Source is a common place that people go to find lists, and I pull lists of homeowners in certain cities that I deal in who meet a certain criteria, which are equity. So I mail people who have high equity, and I also mail people who are over a certain age, because what I find is I get most of my deals come from people who are a little older, say 50 years and older. And so instead of marketing to everybody, because a 20-year-old who just bought a house is not going to sell it. They're not in a position. They don't have the equity. Equity sort of implies that they've been in the house for a while. So those tend to be the older folks. So I mail directly to age and equity. It's pretty much that simple. And we're doing a lot of mailings here, and I'm getting a lot of deals. I'm really turning about 4 to 6 houses a month at this point.
Wow. And so you're not focusing solely on absentee owner with that, right? You're just doing...
No, I don't even care. I don't even differentiate. I'm mailing both absentee and people who live in the home. I don't find that it makes a tremendous difference. I don't know that absentee owners are necessarily way more motivated. And as a matter of fact, the vast majority of my deals come from people who actually live in the house still.
Wow, yeah, because you get a lot more competition with the absentee owner because everybody's mailing to them.
Yeah.
What's the gist? So you said postcards mainly, right? So what's the gist of your postcard?
I keep it real simple. I've refined it over time, but I'll read one to you. Actually, I've got one in front of me. I'm going to stack them because when you do a lot of postcards, you get a lot of returns. So on the front it says, I have a couple variations, but this one that I'm looking at says, "I buy houses!" ! Big bold block letters. Then it has the address and the return address. On the back it has the homeowner's first name, and it says, "My name is Mike, and I would like to buy your house located at whatever street. Please call me at your earliest convenience." And I have a voicemail number that's there. All my calls go to voicemail. And then on the right-hand side, I have a couple of bullet points. No realtor fees. I buy your house as is. No repairs necessary. Close when you want. No inspection. So that's basically what my postcard looks like. And at the bottom, I've added a couple things because you get a lot of calls from people who say all they want to know is, how did you get my information? Like, that's all they care about. So I added a little blurb at the bottom that says, "I obtained your address using county records. This information is available to the general public." So that cuts out a lot of calls that I don't have to return or listen to. It saves me a little bit of time. And then it just says, if you want to be removed, give me a call and I'll remove you. So you get a lot of people saying either A, how'd you get this information, or B, please take me off your list. So it sort of eliminates those two calls. Yeah,
no, that's really smart to do it that way. And it's funny because I do have a story from years ago when I was sending out a lot of postcards, and I was also doing my website stuff, and I had my website, I think it was on the postcard, but I noticed that I started getting a lot of traffic from this guitar forum, online, and I was like, "What? Why are these people coming to my website about buying houses from this guitar forum?" So I go over and I do a search for my web address on there, or my name or something, and I find a post, and this guy's saying, "I got this postcard from this guy, and I'm trying to figure out what it's all about. He wants to buy my house. It's not for sale." And he was thinking like it was some kind of scam or something. And, you know, it's just funny to read all the responses to that post in that forum where people are coming up with all these crazy stories and ideas and everything about why I'm sending him a postcard. And one person even said, I did research on him and he's some, you know, big shot attorney. It's like, that's not true, you know, and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, you know, they're talking about all this and my phone number and my email address, all that stuff is on the postcard. Like all it would take was a phone call.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right,
it was just
yeah.
hilarious. But
Well, it's funny when you send someone a postcard to buy their house, the varying responses you get everything from, oh, this is great, it's just what I need, I'm very excited about selling my house. I've gotten my life threatened on voicemail because people take it very personal. Like, hey, why are you contacting me? Why are you focusing on my house? Why are you so interested in my house? And I've had to call some of these people back and say, listen, I send out thousands of these per month. I'm sorry. I don't even know exactly what address you're calling from. You have to let me know. I send out so many of these. So they think like I'm sending out one postcard to them, and I've been watching their house for months, and it's just funny the way they think.
Yeah, and that can be hard too because they're sitting there threatening you, and then you have to get their address so that you can take them off the list.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
It's like they're doing all that threatening, and then they don't want to give their address because, you know.
Yeah, totally.
Anyway.
And the funny thing is, some people they'll call up the voicemail and they'll go, hi, I received your postcard. Never send me one again. Click. It's like, unfortunately, you're going to get one again because I don't know who you are.
Right. Yeah, it's always tough. So we've covered a lot of ground in this episode. I think there's a whole bunch of great information. And, you know, I guess just a real quick question, you know, as far as, do you have a book that you've enjoyed lately that you think that the Flipping Junkie listeners out there would be interested in?
Let's see. I'm looking at my bookcase right now. Let me see what I've looked at. You know, this isn't really. I'm sorry. I don't know if you can still hear me. I stood up. I don't know. This isn't really real estate, but there's a guy that I really enjoy reading his stuff. It's all good stuff, and it's related to business. You know, not necessarily real estate specifically, but it's Dan Kennedy. I don't know if you're familiar with Dan Kennedy.
Oh yeah, direct marketing.
Dan Kennedy's the best. Yeah. So the last one that I've read that I really enjoyed was No BS Wealth Attraction for Entrepreneurs. You know, he's got the whole series of No BS for, you know, whatever, insert the topic. But I love Dan Kennedy. I think he's awesome, and I always get a lot of good stuff when I read his books. So that's somebody I would definitely recommend everyone read.
Awesome. I appreciate it. And, you know, how can all the listeners out there find you?
You can find me at the podcast website is Just Start Real Estate. So you could email me at juststartrealestate. I'm sorry, Mike at juststartrealestate.com. You can also email me at mike.simmons@webuyROI.com. It's a great place to get a hold of me. And if anybody's interested, like I said, I'm doing just a ton of wholesaling right now in Michigan. It's a great market for rentals for sure, but flipping, people who are doing things out of state or even in the state of Michigan, shoot me an email. Let's talk and see if it makes sense for you.
Great. And we create show notes on the page of flippingjunkie.com. And so the notes for this show and links to resources that we mentioned in the episode can be found at flippingjunkie.com/podcast/Mike Simmons. So if you go to flippingjunkie.com/podcast/Mike Simmons, you'll be able to find information about everything that we talked about. And, you know, I've really enjoyed having you on the show, Mike, and I think everyone's going to get a lot out of it. So thanks so much.
Good. No, I appreciate doing this. I love being on this side of the microphone. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot less stressful for me. I know how you feel on that side. So it's a fun time to be on something like this. And I like you said, we've known each other kind of a long time now, actually. So I'm happy to be a part of this, and I really look forward to hearing the episode.
All right, I hope you enjoyed that episode as much as I had in interviewing Mike. He's a great guy. I learned a lot of stuff from him. If you want to learn more about flipping houses, check out flippingjunkie.com and be sure to subscribe for more great information that I send in an email newsletter. And also check out leadpropeller.com. Those are the real estate investor websites that we provide other real estate investors. Anybody that's known me for a while has known that most of my leads come from my house buying website. And we provide those websites for other investors at leadpropeller.com. Check it out.